Failing with fire is just that. It's just a failure unless there's fire behind it. You latch onto people who have passion. Failures have become catalysts to the most incredible moments in our careers, in our personal lives, and I think it's important to highlight those moments before we highlight the wins.
Welcome to Fail with Fire, a brand new podcast we're bringing to the table by AdBeacon, which is our favorite data attribution / first-party data platform. I'm your host, Phoenix, and this is just definitely a podcast about failing with fire because we know that it's just that. It's failing unless there is fire behind it. And I know for myself and for the guests that are going to be joining us over this series, failures have become catalysts to the most incredible moments in our careers, in our personal lives. And I think it's important to highlight those moments before we highlight the wins. I think failing is winning. But that being said, I am so excited to bring our first guest on here. His name is Matt Erickson. He has a very special place in my heart because we have worked together for a good amount of years now in many breadths of work. He also just a good guy who has a brilliant brain. But before I even go into that, I think I'll introduce the new structure of what this podcast is going to look like. Number one, I'm going to do my intro of my guests because they're not only incredible people, they're usually really good friends of mine. Number two, what we're going to do is I want Matt or our guest to introduce themselves elevator pitch wise. So when I mean elevator pitch, I want to know like how his mom would introduce him to me at a barbecue. And then we're going to start to talk about maybe a time you had, Matt, that you failed with fire and what that looks like for you and how you got out of that and what sparked change. The last bit is hot takes on what's going on. We just had threads release in Facebook. I want to know what your take is on that. We can go back and forth. I'm sure they're different takes. But that being said, let me introduce you to our newest guest and our first guest, Matt Erickson.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me, Phoenix. I'm excited about this podcast. And when you asked me to be the first guest on this, it means a lot. I appreciate it.
My truest friend in the space. Matt is a really interesting guy. Let me just intro him like I would intro any of my friends. It's a really interesting place to be when you have friends before you have titles. And I met you before I knew your title. I meet 90% of the people in the space before I know their title. And that's the best way to know people.
For sure.
What I like to say about Matt is, yes, he is the director of marketing at National Positions, which is a fantastic agency. I'm a little biased as well because I used to be the director of paid social there, but a lot of my growth is because of Matt. When Matt is a jack of all trades, he's able to dive into anything. If he doesn't know it, he'll research it. He doesn't believe in subpar work. My friend mentioned this term that has stuck with me for some time, and Matt embodies it to the highest degree, is executional excellence. And Matt embodies that. So all of the things that you're seeing in terms of Forbes recognized quotes for our CEO at National Positions, and all the way down to my Affiliate World, AdWorld presentations and concepts behind it, just like anything that is of value in marketing, Matt has done. So I wanted to bring him on here, especially because he has been spearheading a lot of the AI conversation. But yeah, Matt, welcome.
Thank you again. When Phoenix and I first met, I won't go into the whole story, but because we were still in masking days at that time, that's back when I still lived in Los Angeles, I actually didn't know who Phoenix was. I had heard the name Phoenix, because how can you not remember the name Phoenix? But from our first conversation, it was very like, wow, okay, it was one of my first experiences. It sounds a little showing my age here, but of meeting someone who was quite a bit younger than me. But I felt a kinship with where her mind was, with the way she thought, and her brashness is not the word, but it's just very open. You know, this is who she is. This is the way she thinks. And there was no wall. And we immediately I felt like we just clicked. Yeah, it's been a fun, I guess, almost 3 years now.
Actually, 3 years this month.
3 years this month.
Yeah.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. Our anniversary. Yeah, that being said, though, I want you to pitch me you as if your mom were. We just got over July 4th. I want as if your mom's at my barbecue going, Phoenix, I want you to be Matt. How would she describe you?
How would she would say, "This is my youngest," even though I'm 42 now, but she would be like, "This is my youngest, and he's my dancer, and he's an artist, and that's about it." She wouldn't, my work titles and that kind of stuff. She would probably just say, "He just got a promotion, and he doesn't, and now he lives out here with us." Out here being, I live out in Nashville. And that would probably be it, because I'm still her baby. So that would be the pitch.
Just to clarify, lives out here with us does not mean that Matt lives in the basement of his mother's house, which again, if that's your thing, pop off. I'm judging you, but that's not what this is.
For sure. No, yeah, I moved out in October of 2020. They live in Huntsville. I live in Nashville. So that's where I am now. But yeah, I'm within driving distance.
I'm the world's best wing woman, so I'm just trying to shout it out there. Matt's single, not living with his mother, has reliable transportation.
These
and
are
a
all the
great
high
job
points.
title.
I have all the basics covered.
Yeah.
In this day and age, hey, as long as you have I got my own place, got my own car, paid off, debt free.
Wow.
Score.
That's not real in 2023. Just want to let the ladies know that now. But that being said, yeah, you were actually a professional ballroom dancer at one point, and I was a dancer too. So I think we really connected on that level first. And I have a hunch and I have a hypothesis, which I would love to have you think about. But
yeah,
I believe that people who do sports or people who compete in some capacity have this weird wire that just went a little loose. And not only are we very dedicated and driven, but there's this structure in terms of execution that is in play. I think with dancers, there's a creativity component and then there's also execution. So how I want to blend that is, for example, when I was competing, we were at a national level, we were extremely good. But that being said, if you were 10 minutes early, you were on time.
Yeah.
You fought to be at the front of the room because you wanted to get noticed by the choreographer that was in play, or maybe your director at the time, your dance director.
Yeah.
Wanted to be noticed. You wanted to solo. You always had to bring your gear. And if you didn't bring your shoes or you didn't bring the right attire, you're kicked out. If you're late, you're kicked out, late being on time. So these principles don't really play into effect, I would say, in 2023. I've noticed that's fizzled out. And because you're a little bit more my senior, I would say, 2 years my senior, I wonder what your thoughts are with that. Do you believe that same idea that we have this weird thing about us and maybe that's what attributed to where we are now?
As the dancer thing?
Yeah, or anyone who's competed or...
Yeah, I do feel, because I didn't grow up, being that I was the youngest, my brother was always, he was the one who was into sports. He's the one who went to the Army. He was the artist, actually. He did all that. And I was the quirky kid in elementary school and middle school that got picked on and didn't really want to be out there, because I felt like if I did, that I was immediately get knocked down for it. But again, I was a kid. Everyone has their issues they go through when they're in school. It wasn't until I got out of high school that things started to go. It was literally the last year of my senior year. My junior and senior year. Once I got out and found it was a swing dance community out in Sacramento, California, I realized I had a knack for it. This was never something I ever pictured myself getting into. That became like my drug. It just went from not really having a place to finding a community and going, oh, wow. And then I, over the next few years, went from doing that and then doing some little local competitions and that kind of stuff. And then doing national events and starting to compete nationally. And it became, and I always there's a kind of competition. They have what they would call a showcase competition. And we would still classify what we call Lindy Hop as a street dance. So I started getting recognized at events, but doing what we would call a Jack and Jill event or a Jack and Jill competition. Basically what that means, you know what that means. But for those who don't, you would have all the leaders in one group, followers in another group. You'd be paired up randomly and you would be given a random song and you'd have to do your best. So you had to adapt on the fly. And I love that. That was my favorite, trying to actually remember and having a structure to, this was the routine and this was the exact way to do it every time. I was bored with it. It was almost, to me, it was maybe because it was more work to actually have to remember the exact way to do things.
I wanted to stop you there because I think it's really cool to just talk about that really quickly. There's something in dancers and it's called improv.
Yes.
What you just described, and it's thinking on your feet. I think a lot in marketing as we grow, the best marketers that I have, and if you hear a buzz, it's literally my threads blowing up because everyone is joining late and deciding.
Because you're so popular, even on
I'm
Thread.
not
Even though it
popular.
launched
I'm
like
reminded by
24 hours ago.
I'm reminded by everybody I'm not popular, which is fine. But there's this thing, right, where you do this improv. And I think that the best marketers or the best business people in any space are the ones that are able to think on their feet when they're pushed up against a wall. And that's the reason why I said I think there's a correlation. There's my greatness coming back out. I think there's a direct correlation, if anything, between people who compete, especially in something like an art form and self-expression, and have to think on their feet to be able to win. You said something so key. You said, I started and I went to a swing dancing class and I was good at it and I liked it. And then you fell in love with it and got obsessive over it. It's the same thing with marketing, at least for me. And I know for you, you get it. You have the flexibility to pivot. You have the flexibility to be creative, but you see a direct line of effect from your efforts.
Yeah, for sure. And if we're pushing that down the line to the marketing standpoint, let's just take, maybe this is why when there's a lot of structure, let's just say I don't thrive. When there's a ton of, this is the way. When I know, okay, these are the rough parameters, okay, you can go. Like, all right. You mentioned, and I'm with you, like athletics are the same thing. In fact, that's probably the epitome of it. If you're actually, I never got there, but if you're playing on a court, you're playing on a field, you're playing in something, you are 100% in adapt mode. You may have a playbook, but it's going to change. Getting at the marketing side, when I was taking electives in college, you had to take whatever. And there was a Photoshop class. I didn't know what it was. And I went to school in marketing. They didn't have, I don't even know if they still do. They didn't have a digital marketing course. There was no digital marketing course. There was like international marketing and there was business. Like there wasn't, It was just concepts. But once I got into this actually take it back, it was a InDesign class. It was InDesign. So it was layouts and stuff. I came into class early one day and there was this one other student and she was painting in colors on a black and white photo. And I was like, what are you doing? What is this? She's like, Photoshop. And it was blowing my mind. There was a black and white photo and she was coloring in grass. And I just had never seen anything like it. And I said, where's the class for this? And she goes, you have it in the Adobe suite you got for this class. I just didn't realize it. So I went home and started teaching myself how to use Adobe. And then it spiraled. Then I was starting graphic design. Then I got jobs in graphic design. The snowball kept rolling to where I am now.
Yeah, but I just want to hold tight on something really quick. And anybody listening, this to you sounds like common sense, right? You have this class, some girl tells you, yeah, duh, you have Adobe and Photoshop in your course, it's in your course pack. And you went home and dove in headfirst to learn. Yeah. That's not normal. Okay. That's not a normal thing. To you and I, that's normal, right? Yeah. Again, this is coming back to where we're speaking on in terms of your executional excellence. It's like you knew that you had a resource. You knew you needed to figure it out. And not once did you go, no, somebody else has to figure it out for me. And again, I think I need to take a few steps back when I said sports, because I do also see that people who are in sports at a very high level, for example, let's just say baseball, football, soccer, right? Yes. You have a coach and the coach tells you almost militaristically, you need to do this. And as you get higher up in the level, your creativity fades. You do this, you learn plays, and then you move on. I think for dancers, you don't have that. You have to be creative in order to stand out. You have to do things differently. I think to some degree for sports, like your style and your skill have to increase. But and again, like I might be saying the same thing in different ways, but I think the thing that we need to take away from this conversation is it's one thing to be creative. It's another thing to execute. And it's also this tenacity to just get shit done. Yeah. And you have that. But I want to just segue straight into what this full podcast is about. Because now that we know who you are, Matt, and like where your head's at, how you just figure things out.
Yeah.
Can you walk me through a time that it was like a complete failure.
Yep.
Like you felt like down in the dumps. I'm going to take you through a depressive time.
No, this is probably good. I was actually thinking about this. We remember our failures far more than we remember our successes. But typically, you may have 10x successes to your failures, but the failures are the ones that you're like, oh, let me tell you a story. And yeah, there have been a lot in my life. But rather than, I was trying to think of this, and rather than getting into, there was a time when I got a Google Ads account banned.
Okay, welcome to everybody. But
Welcome
yeah.
to everybody. So I'm going to go into I was thinking of like a rock bottom moment. So I'll fast track it, but basically I moved to LA originally 2013.
Okay.
And I was finishing an MBA course. So I was driving to Sacramento and then back to LA every weekend to finish. I was doing this executive MBA course to finish that up. Phoenix, you've been through that. You know what that workload's. I apologize if you hear a bang, it's my chat going on. But the company I originally moved to, 6 months in, they got acquired. Actually, the day I arrived, they got acquired. And so 6 months later, the entire office just got dissolved. So I was in Burbank going, what do I do? I got a job at a company called PCM. Very nice people. I don't know if they're still around. They used to be called PC Mall. They're basically like a Tiger Direct kind of company. And I came in as a channel marketing manager. And I'm going, okay, it's my first, at that point, I guess it was my first official title with the word marketing in it. It's like, all right, marketing, here we go. I'm thinking of like my design. I'm thinking of all this stuff. And after I got there, I was basically the touch point person between brands like Samsung and Acer and Fujitsu and these other tech companies.
Yeah, they're very small.
Very small companies to more or less do ad placement and promotional stuff within the PCM ecosystem. So I figured that out and it's like, man, this is horrible. This isn't fun. And I was sitting here going, I have 3 degrees now. I have my MBA at this point. I'm in this place and I'm just not happy and I'm making just enough to live on, basically. And I'm commuting.
How much were you making? Let's be real.
At that time, I was making $45K.
Oh, yeah. See, that's honest. My first job, I was crying with happiness because I got 37.5. So continue. Sorry to cut you off.
Let me put some context to that. When I had first moved down, my first job, I'll just call it a corporate gig, I was making 15 grand more. That's the company that got eaten up and then evaporated. So I already took, was that a 25% hit? But I didn't care. I was in LA, it's fine. I was also commuting from Burbank to El Segundo. So if anyone doesn't know what it's long. Point is, after about 4 or 5 months, I had already started putting out other resumes. I was trying to find something else. And I was getting several first touch responses from Austin. And something in my brain went, okay, I don't need to be in LA. And I went into my boss and I didn't have a job. I just went into my boss and I said, I'm putting in my 2 weeks. And she went, what? And they actually asked me to stay longer. And I was like, nope. I was very hard-headed. I was like, no, and in 2 weeks, I pretty much sold whatever I could sell, packed whatever I could in my car, and I drove to Austin, Texas. And once I arrived in Austin, the room that I had set up to rent via Craigslist was no longer available. So I'm in Austin and I have 24 hours. I need to find somewhere to live. So I found one room in this not great part of town. So I had 1 bedroom, but it was a microwave and a fridge, a little smaller than the fridge you'd get in a hotel, and just what was on my back and in my car.
Yeah.
And I was there for, I think, 4 months. Every day I was putting out resumes but once I got there, crickets. I had absolutely nothing. So after 4 months, it was getting into wintertime. I called my folks who lived in Sacramento and I said, can I come home? It was the hardest thing.
Wait, before you even do that.
Yeah.
I know what that call feels like because I've been through that. And how old are you at this point?
At this point, I think it was 10 years ago, 32.
Okay, so you're 32 years old. Eddie tells you you're a 32-year-old man, not to beat you down, but let's just be
No, that's why this is hard. This is why this is good. So go ahead.
This is bad, but this is good. You're 32 years old. You took a risk, which is what everybody tells you. Take a risk, or somebody will tell you don't take a risk.
Yeah.
You go to Austin, your plans fall through. You don't have a job. You have a terrible apartment.
Yeah. I don't even have an apartment. I have a room, and that's it. It wasn't even an apartment. It was just a room, like a bedroom.
Okay. Which still grateful you have a roof over your head, but still not great. And then you have to call mom and dad.
Yeah.
Okay. Just wanted to take a second there.
Yeah. It was
It's a pride problem there, but it's also a gut-wrenching problem. Anyway, please continue. I just wanted to...
No, you're right. And that's why I've never really told this whole story. It was a moment where I was going, I had no connections here. I have no friends here. I have no prospects here. And also I realized now I was severely depressed.
Yeah.
I just was, because up to this point, I had that thing wrong. I'm this old. I should be doing this. I should be doing this. And I just thought this was the risk that I was going to take, and it was all going to break free. LA's the problem. This is all this other stuff. So I called home, and luckily, my folks have been the most supportive people in my life, short of my very few close friends. So I called home and I said, can I come home? Can I come back? And they're like, yes, please. They're always worried. They're like, yes, please. So I went, okay. At the end of the month, I'm coming home. So packed everything up, got in my car, 24 hours straight to LA. That was my first stop. I think I slept for 2 hours on the side of the road. I had to pull over because I was exhausted. And you want to talk rock bottom? I'm laying in my backseat literally on top of my belongings and my clothes, trying to get an ounce of sleep so I don't crash my car. So I get to LA, I take a couple photos in Santa Monica. I'm on the beach, like pretending. Now I was posting this like I'm back home, and I was posting like, hey, aren't you glad to have me back? And really it was like I had nowhere else to go.
Yeah.
Went from LA, and it's another 6 hours to Sacramento. Got up, knocked the door open, and I started crying.
Yeah.
I was done.
Yeah.
Anywho, so I spent a year trying to get back to LA. And once it broke through, I finally, you talk about people who are like, I've posted or I've applied 1,000 jobs and whatever. I've lived that life.
Yeah.
So the point is, I had to know what bottom felt like. To then go, hey, any ounce that I get back was a mile. When I got back to LA, I finally got back. I was working downtown in a high rise. That didn't work out, but it took me literally a year of applying and doing interviews. And originally I wanted to work in entertainment. So I was applying to Warner Brothers and everyone, but so I was getting first round interviews. But what I learned during that time, and this is why that 1 year was such a growth period, was because I was getting asked on calls, what's your experience with SEO? And I was going, what? I'm writing, what are they talking about? I didn't know what this was.
Yeah, what is SEO?
Yeah, what's a SEO? And so I was learning a lot of terms in interviews that I wasn't going to get. They're saying paid media. And I was like, I wonder what that is. Like I was learning what was going on in the industry at that time during that whole year. So I was researching a lot because I had nothing else to do. At the same time, I was connected back with my friend Matt, where I was doing events with him. So I was doing events for, it was actually an interesting time because he was getting events for things like Marvel at the time and Disney and Facebook and all of these. So I was going to these, so I was trying to network that way too, but it was keeping some money coming in so I could grind it out. But so then once I got back to LA and was able to at least start understanding what people were talking about when they were talking about what is SEO and this kind of content, an individual contributor, and all of these terms we throw around now and don't think about until, and I went through a couple different positions until I ended up at National Positions, 6 years ago now, just as a marketing manager. And CEO is a great guy. And he really, it was definitely sink or swim, but he was patient enough to know, hey, he's got something. He gave me a shot. Like he understands.
Right.
But since I'd done so much research in all these different areas, now it's going to come out soon, but I'm the VP of marketing at national positions now.
I didn't even know
But
that.
I know you didn't know that. So by the time this comes out, that'll be out. But yeah, so
wait, I need to back up really quick. So you went from being jobless.
marketing. Yeah.
Jobless.
Yeah.
Okay. You were living in a room. I made you cry. I'm here for it, which I appreciate your vulnerability. Honestly, I wish I was more like that. But you were raw and you were honest. And then you came home and it's just like this deafening silence that you have with yourself. Like it's depression. I've been there. One day I'll share my story maybe on this podcast. It's not about me, but I know that feeling, right? And anybody who knows that feeling knows that they're terrified of being less than what they have portrayed themselves to be out loud. And social media is a weird place for that. I also think societal standards in a previous generation have buffered this idea that you always have to be better than everybody else. And especially because you love the entertainment industry, which I come from as well.
Yeah.
There's this perception of it's this weird conversation of this is where I came from, this is what I'm doing, this is where I'm going. It's like you always have to give this narrative. And for you to be so quiet inside and hurting, and then now, you get a chance with the CEO, who, by the way, also gave me a chance. I don't think he had much choice at the time, but it's okay. Your growth story, your fire story coming back might not have been so fiery, but it was a slow fucking burn. And you're a VP of marketing now.
And the thing is that it was not somewhere I always wanted to be. Okay, yes, it's a title. And I will always back off and say, okay, it's a title. But that time of basically, quite frankly, in my head going, what are you doing? You don't know what you're doing. What do you really have to offer here? Having to learn and make other mistakes, obviously, kind of taking a step back, and because I also didn't have any, there still is very few. There was no one in my circle that was wanting to do what I did. My folks came from government work, state work. That was their life, which I thank God for. They were able to give me support growing up. They were always there. But it wasn't like my parents were entrepreneurs or anything where I could go, hey, let me bounce this idea. Even now I talk about passive income and they're like, what? Just buy a house. Like, it's hard for them. So yeah, it went from being, I think I posted about this a while back. It was like 10 years ago. I think I said at the time, 10 years ago, I was in a room. I had no prospects. I didn't know what to do. Maybe had $1,000 to my name in my account at the time. That was before I left Texas. Now I went from the marketing manager here at NP. I helped establish the mission statement and actually the core values of the company, which I'm proud of. And then I went to being like senior marketing manager to director. And hopefully by the time this comes out, it'll be announced to the rest of the company. Now I'm the VP of marketing. And I think the only way I was able to do that, going all the way back to our whole like dance and improv discussion, was like, I do like to say, I know enough about almost every area of marketing to be dangerous, not to be a threat, but to be dangerous. If I have to talk to the SEO team, switch and talk to the Google Ads team, switch and talk to the social media team, marketing, I can switch and do that, which I'm immensely grateful for, because that's how one of the ways I feel that I'm valuable. But I do care that whoever I'm talking to knows what they're talking about. And if they know more than me, then I know what they're talking about. Not because I'm an expert, but because if they can speak where I have to go, run that by me one more time.
Yeah.
Then they know where they're going. And those are the people that I'll end up latching onto, because if they, and again, this isn't an ego thing.
No.
If they know more than me, that means two things. One, they've done their own research. But two, they're excited enough about it to make me interested.
I've noticed that you latch onto people who have passion because you identify with passion.
100%.
There's also something in you that's been really, I don't know, I have the benefit and I would say the honor to have worked with you and alongside you in many capacities. But I think what's really interesting too is that, number one, you meet someone where they're at, you give them a chance, and if they don't match the energy in terms of like excitement, or at least will to learn more, you shut down, which I admire. You're like, oh no, I admire that because I'm the same way. Unfortunately, unfortunate for you, like fortunately for me, I had to manage teams, right? So you can't shut down. But for you, you work with so many people beautifully, you know how to work with them, but there needs to be a barometer of excellence. There needs to be a standard set. And I think you do a really good job of that because you get very short-tempered with people that don't bring enough to the table. That's rare, right? Like those characteristics are really strong.
Phoenix knows me well enough to know I sometimes will just turn on a dime and I will get very snappy. And I call it, I think maybe it's because you have this, and I don't want to say this is having enough years in the game, but I think it's having enough skin, blood, sweat, and tears in the game. Your bullshit meter gets very short. Now, I love when people come to me and say, hey, I was messing with this and it didn't work, or I can't figure this out. Like they've done something. And then it's, let me hop in. Let's see if we can figure this out. I've done that all the time. Let's hop on a Zoom. We'll share screen. We'll try to figure out how to do it. But yeah, I definitely have a bit of a short fuse. And I think it's just coming from experiencing enough people who care about what they do, who are passionate about what they do, that I go, hey, sorry, they set the standard. Sorry, but that is the standard that I look for.
My girlfriends and I, we always have this conversation of dating. It's so interesting. So if you manage a team, if you own an agency, if you own a platform, I think it's really important to recognize a few things. Before I even get into the comparison to dating, Matt is notorious for sending, maybe we'll mention AI, and everyone's like, oh, what really AI? But very seldom do you find people who actually do the research and put together documents and want to create white papers on a topic or for platforms or whatever it may be. And Matt will do that. He'll put together so much. He'll send a loom over to everybody of what he's put together. And the problem is that 85% of the people don't watch it, or 85% of the people don't look at the document. And my beautiful petty friend right here will go into the last viewed or last edit or last watch and watch the people who do look at it and don't. And I think that's there's a side of just, again, executional excellence, but there's also keeping a sense of accountability. And it's also recognizing as a business owner that those people are your A players. And if you don't treat your A players like A players, they're going to leave. And you're going to end up with a bunch of C- players. And your A players are going to leave you and become A players elsewhere that do recognize you. I'm so glad you're being recognized because you deserve it.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I want to come back. This is a realization that I had around this whole subject. I told Phoenix and other people this, hey, I don't want to ask someone to do something I haven't done myself. So I tend to yes, I'll get in and do things. However, I've realized that means I will sometimes have a problem letting things go. Oh, I know that I can do it like this. Why can't other people do it like this? What I've learned that I need to do, two things. One, take a step back and actually listen. And what I mean by that is years ago, I have two tattoos, and they're both one's from my dad, one's from one of my best friends. And the first word on this one is grace. Giving people some grace in the sense of, if I, as a leader, am not willing to listen and try to figure out where those nuggets of wisdom are beyond my own ego, then I'm not doing my job.
Yeah.
So I was working on this one project. It was about some content to go on a website. And I finally just shut up more on the call and just listened. And I realized this one individual, I leave them nameless, they had put in a few nuggets of ideas, but then the other individual on the call was just bypassing it and just talking over it. I don't think consciously, but so I ended up doing a one-on-one with this person. And just before I even said, hey, we should do this, I said, tell me I think you had ideas. I think you had some thoughts that what were those? And I just let her speak. And I told her, I said, after maybe 5 minutes, I said, we're 80% on the same page. So it was me realizing I do have a tendency, because this is where the ego comes in, of me going, okay, now I have this role. I need to maybe even project I know XYZ. If I'm not willing to step back and see where the talent is, I'm not going to help actually foster anybody, which is what the end of the game should be. I can't do this by myself. So yeah, so since then I finally realized, okay, I need to be able to actually dictate's not the word, disseminate's not the word. Basically, I need to be able to work on the business, not in the business. I'm still learning. I had to step back and go, okay, even though I think I have all these skills to do X, Y, and Z, there are plenty of other people that do too. I just need to be willing to listen and find out who they are and give them the shot. And so that's something, it's still a learning curve for me.
Yeah, I think to the point of failing with fire, it's interesting because in I guess societal terms, you failed at one point in your life, and you also know what it's like to not have a job, not have an income, and you're finally given a shot, and you're going to do everything you possibly can to make this the best shot. And it seems to reflect in your work ethic. I think it seems to reflect in how much you care. You're also a passionate person, so that makes sense as well. But also on the compassionate side of yourself, seeing someone else who isn't being heard and giving them the opportunity, I think is key. So I just want to thank you for sharing that story, because I think a lot of people can resonate with it. I think a lot of people in the D2C space, and that's a big reason why I wanted to start with you, is you are a marketing director. Sorry, you are a VP of marketing.
I'll take it. I'll take either one.
At a California agency based in Westlake Village, but also I think I'm hearing this narrative nonstop of I was broke and I put $100 million in ads and it went under and did it and those are really valid stories. But I also think there are other stories and there are other things that happen that are real and true and are the bread and butter, if not the pillars, to a lot of these agencies. I also think it's so important to highlight different stories that you were speaking to, because I have people that have worked on teams with me that leave because of monetary gain, because they're so scared of losing everything because they risked it all. And I have to take a step back and go, okay, but there's also mentorship gain. There's things that you should value here because it'll make you mature. Because I have found some incredible strategists in my time that far surpass my skill set, will always far surpass my skill set. And I think that's great. But they need mentorship. They need refinement. They need to understand the value of appreciating people. Like you were just saying, oh my gosh, I'm still learning. I'm still learning how to communicate, how to process information. That's a journey in itself. And it's like college too, right? Like I don't believe that everybody needs to go to college. I really hope that the college I teach at doesn't hear this, but because I still value education, right?
Yeah.
Whether MBA or EMBA, and I teach.
Yeah.
However, I've always told the students, I was like, look, find a mentor that you want to learn from, not just the skill, but the person themselves. Who do you want to become? Because that has far more value than that of a skill set. And your failures will be fueled by fire if you have the right headspace, if you understand that life is a bunch of hurdles coming your way, fireballs, and how you navigate them is just as important. But speaking of fireballs, let's talk about threads.
Threads.
So for those of you who are hiding under a rock, aka my mother, I don't know when threads will be in her peripheral. But anyway, just as a beautiful summary, imagine if Twitter no longer existed and got plopped into the hands of Facebook and Instagram. So it's just basically text threads or text that is published, and then you can continue to build on that text. Very similar to Twitter, but there's a reason why I favor personally threads over Twitter, and it's only been 24 hours, if 24 hours. I want to know what your thoughts are. What's your hot take on threads? And I'll tell you mine.
My hot take on threads. And by the way, just for anyone listening or watching, I am not a Facebook proponent. I'm not a Meta proponent. I pretty much, it's like they just rip off every single idea, buy something, slap it.
Just kidding. That's fine.
Yeah. But here's the thing. So this morning I got on, and after downloading the wrong app, by the way, if you go to download threads, it's threads, comma, an Instagram app. I downloaded something. I had no idea what this was. Anyways, but I got on it and posted it, got a few things posted. I'm started to actually write a piece of content about it. It was actually very clean. It was very clean in the sense of, if you open up Twitter and you open up this one side by side, I was like, okay, if you go to search, granted it's new, you have your trending comment and here's all that stuff. And it reminded me of the very early days of Facebook in the sense of where you open it and it was like a post, it was the image, wasn't much else. That's all there was. That was my initial thought. I was like, okay, this is clean. I did upload some stuff. I did think, wow, the image quality and the video quality was better than
Okay.
Twitter. I looked initially and went, I also realized, at least on my initial setup, I was curious. I didn't have the character limit that I had on Twitter. I went,
$7 a month. That's a you thing.
that's a me thing. Yeah, on Twitter, I haven't paid for the Twitter Blue. I went on to Threads and I just started talking a thing about something some midge or anything. And I was like, whoa, it's still going. It didn't prompt me with you have X amount of characters left. I did tell somebody else, I said, if this wasn't a Meta product, I wouldn't know it was from Facebook. That was the initial thing, was just because it was almost the school grade version of Twitter. Like, it was very basic.
I think it looks exactly like Twitter. I think it's literally a copy and paste other than GIFs.
I didn't talk about UX. I didn't talk about actually, look, I'm just talking about, if I go to search, there's friends and people to follow. Okay, fine.
Got it.
Mentions, that kind of stuff. Complete color inverse. So Twitter, you have the white background and the black, and then you have the inverse of the black and the white. There's some quirks though. I haven't figured this out yet. It's weird. It's because it's tied in through Insta. So if you have you go to sign in through Threads, sign in with your Instagram account, go to your Instagram account. So I'm going, what's the connection between Instagram and Threads? So I thought, okay, if you go into Instagram, maybe you can go to your stories and it'll post to your Threads. When to post a story, no option to post the Threads. I posted an actual thing on Instagram, and you can post to Facebook but not to Threads.
You can't.
Okay, I'm going from let me just use it like I would using it. And there wasn't the straight up option to do that.
They're not like, okay, let's look at it from like experience of somebody who's just using it from a consumer standpoint and not from someone who delves into this every day. Yeah. Fair.
Exactly. And I'm still like tinkering around and going through it. There's a setting, if you're in just pull it up. If you're in the app on the top left, it's just weird because I'm trying to figure out, my initial thought was this, okay, at least on the initial view, if it's not just a very clean, simple user base of just sharing from Insta to Threads, maybe they're trying to keep it separate to have a different experience. They're trying to have, this is this experience and this is the Instagram experience. However, at the top of my feed here, on the top left, or my left, you have the little, this looks like a settings spot. So you go into the privacy area here. So I went into other privacy settings and it kicks me over to Instagram. So it's doing privacy settings from Insta, not from, so there's some weird little hiccups in here where I'm going, what is the connection you're trying to make between Threads or Instagram? Are you trying to keep it as a straight up Twitter rival, or are you trying to actually tie it into your other ecosystems?
So I think this thing is genius. My hot take is that I prefer Threads over Twitter. That's my hot take, even though it's no surprise because everyone on the face of the planet knows I hate Twitter, but I'm working on it because that's where people are.
Sure.
Now, I think it's genius because I truly believe that in order for something to pick up steam that has already been done, it has to make you uncomfortable and then therefore itches you to test it, which is clearly working because I think it was like 50 million downloads, something crazy. My other hot take is that, another thing is, to answer your question, it's genius because why wouldn't you want an ecosystem that you're familiar with?
Mm-hmm.
Twitter is a very different beast itself.
Yeah.
Twitter has a very different tone to it. So I don't think Twitter's going to be gone. I joke around that it is, but it's not. There's a very different tone, very troll-like on Twitter. And then there's a very different tone on Facebook and Instagram. What's interesting about Facebook and Instagram and or Meta is that you have an identity already intertwined. So for example, if Matt Erickson is being rude, I can go to Matt Erickson's Instagram immediately, see his family photos, then go to his Facebook and see all these personal things. Like I can dive deeper. And for someone like myself, who's a lot more comfortable sharing my life on Instagram just because that was my generation and never really adopted Twitter, it was a nice hybrid. So now I feel less, I think, paralysis and anxiety over typing the right thing on Twitter to fit its demographic. The second component that I think is going to be extremely important on a paid media side is that we have this hunch of, are there going to be ads on Threads? Of course, there's going to be ads on Threads, but as of right now, that's not true. I think one of two things is going to happen. Number one, we saw that when you set up a campaign, you can choose manual placements. You can choose where your ads go to, whether it's just Instagram stories, Instagram feed, Facebook stories, just do stories together. And now Threads shows up as one of them. Okay. So you've got that. And then you've got another ecosystem potentially. I don't really understand the data and privacy. You would assume that I do, but in terms of this new platform, it should be completely in line with Instagram, which makes sense why it kicked you back over there. It's all the same ecosystem.
Yeah.
But again, like it brings everything to one place rather than hopping and going back and forth, and very smart. They try to take over TikTok. I think they're still somewhat successful because I spend a good amount of time both on Facebook Instagram Reels and or TikTok. Virality moments are there for Instagram, but this was just the next step in the evolution. I'm just interested to see what Zuck does next. We know that Elon's exiting Twitter. I don't think he might care, he might not care. Then there's the rumors about the fighting. But just based on the idea of Threads, I think this was genius because the only conversation we've had about Meta has been, what was it? Not the Oculus, but Web3.
Oh, metaverse.
The metaverse.
So let me spin this for a second. Because here's something, because I was writing, because typically if I'm trying to get an idea out, I start writing about it and then I'll start coming out. Oh, okay, this is where that's helped me process. I don't think this was genius. I think this was necessary because Facebook's user base has been doing what over the past 5 years? Who cares? It's just been, when was the last time you watched a news segment? They're like, oh, someone on Facebook said that that doesn't happen. So-and-so tweeted about this. They tweeted about this. That's in the mainstream. That's what people are talking about.
Threads wasn't genius. It was necessary.
At least that's my, and I'm not saying, when I was saying like, oh, I figure it's simpler or whatever than Twitter, I don't consider that a bad thing. I consider that a very good thing. I would rather have fewer options and nail that shit down. You go onto if you go onto your Facebook page right now, it looks like Yahoo. It looks like a yard sale threw up on an estate sale. It's horrible.
Wait, a what? Threw up on a what?
A yard sale threw up on an estate sale. You have pages, options, marketplace. They try to put everything in one place, which is what the Yahoo, for those of you old enough to remember, Yahoo used to be like Google, and they started to throw news into it and everything else to try to appease everybody, and it became garbage. So 2 things. 1, Twitter has stayed in the mainstream and has become more with the last few years and with Elon and everything else. It's definitely stayed in the limelight. But that's where conversations tend to happen. And social, a lot of they say that like the baby boomer generation is the one that's been more and more coming onto Facebook because they're going to post about their family, going to post about the stuff maybe some of us did 10 or 15 years ago, if you were around at that time. Very basic stuff. Now, people are, I think Meta realized after the metaverse debacle, or maybe even during it, that conversations are happening on Twitter. The actual conversations, not just the content, but the context and content of those conversations. The communities, whether good or bad, trolls or not, was going on Twitter. And they went, you know what? People, this is why I'm thinking there's trying to drive a bit of a wedge between, even though it's linked into Instagram, but they want to have a separate kind of thing because they don't just want to have another platform to post the same content you're posting somewhere else. I think that they want to create an alternative, we'll just call it that, to Twitter, but has the same feeling of, hey, people can put their opinions. There's some reports about that. We won't go into that. But put their opinions and have like conversational threads rather than just putting content like you might have on Instagram or you might have on Facebook. Because Twitter has been growing, which is a surprise considering how old it is now. So that's why I think it was a necessity. They needed something to actually talk to their user base, which were social media users, but actually was to what mattered now.
Yeah, I agree and disagree. I think to a lot of your points, I think Twitter is really great. However, my biggest cringe moment right now is that everybody who's on Twitter is just reposting what they're posting on Twitter on Threads and hoping it hits. And I'm going over here shooting off feet pics. So it's like, it's a different world.
Passive income is passive income, whatever you're going to do.
hitting a dime. And keep in mind, none of those, I think one of those photos are actually of my feet, but the whole idea is shock value. Every new platform, you have to have shock value in order to gain a following. You have to do something different because right now we are saturated, heavily saturated with so many threads. And then there's just the same thing as Twitter. So it will die out unless the people on, and this is my opinion, unless the people on threads find a niche that works for them, that invites them in. So like for me, my current strategy is just me. I'm going to be so undeniably and painfully me, which is very dangerous because I will post the most unhinged things. But then Twitter side is going to be more D2C focused and AdBeacon focused. My Instagram is going to be more of a video play and a reels play as to what's happening in not only D2C, but personal world. Facebook is going to be just for family. I've made that very known. It's kind of awkward when I get people in a space adding me on Facebook unless we're good friends.
Yeah.
It's the fanfare place for me. So and TikTok is another unhinged one. In reality, I think you and I can agree that every single platform has its purpose, and blending all of them is a thing of 2 years ago.
To your point, you said every platform has its purpose. What I hope is that Zuck and Threads, they launch it and they let it marinate for a few months. They don't try to say, we're going to add this feature that's on this platform or this feature and that. They let it marinate to go, okay, what's that?
Soak.
Yeah, let it soak.
Great.
And we had this thing about let it burn out the dead wood. You are going to have those people who are going to post the same crap that they're posting on Twitter, they're posting whatever, because they're trying to treat it like a Twitter platform, which is one of the reasons why when I went to do this post, I was like, let me just try a long one, because I wouldn't do that over there because I can't, because I don't want to, because I'm cheap and I don't want to pay $7 a month or whatever the heck it is. But I think that there needs to be, this is, I think, across a lot of tech and social, like I think you do on AdBeacon too. It's you'll launch new updates and you'll listen. You'll sit back and go, okay, what do people think? What are they saying? What are their thoughts? And that's going to help guide the next round of what's going to happen. And I think that's what Threads should do. I think they had a fine launch. I think they should let people use it, that the people who are going to go, I'm just going to go back to Twitter. Let them go back to Twitter. It's totally fine. But let those who are going to let it evolve organically, however they're going to see fit, and then Meta works to actually amplify that and work towards that.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
Only time will tell, and then you and I will write a case, mainly you, will write a case study on what we see, and we'll see who wins. Survival of the fittest thread tweet.
Done.
Matt, has been an absolute pleasure. For anyone who's listening, where can we find Matt, and where can we follow Matt?
Where can you find and follow me? My social handles are pretty much all, Matt Erickson LA. So if you go on to, I still have my LA handle. My Twitter and my Instagram handles are Matt Erickson LA.
Not Matt Erickson TN. Such a liar.
Yeah, you know what? Here's the thing. I spent most of my life on the West Coast. I got to have a little bit of representation. And I'm flying back every now and then. So yeah, Matt Erickson LA. You can find me on, I believe that's Twitter and Instagram. If you go on LinkedIn, if you're one of those people. Matt Erickson MBA. That's where I get to sport my MBA stuff. And yeah, that's where you can find me. And if you want my email, just DM me on any one of those and I'll send it to you.
Awesome. Matt's also a big fan of AdBeacon. We appreciate that. It's been a wild journey and I really appreciate your support rather. So that being said, not only do I thank you, AdBeacon thanks you, and we are so excited for the episodes to come. First season, first episode kickoff, just a real take on failing with fire or fail with fire. So I hope you guys have a great rest of your week. Drive safely if you're driving, if you're at home on your desktop, multitasking. Thank you for taking the time. I hope my disruptive and weird talks and speech navigates or helps you navigate the day. All right, guys, have a good one. And until next time.